The topic of this video today is federal employees as pawns in the political battle of the shutdown. The shutdown is a political battle. Federal employees are right in the middle of it, and that's why I'm referring to them as pawns. Actually, I'm not the first one to use that term. AFGE President Everett Kelly used the term in a publication called The People's World. He was quoted as saying, "The shutdown was about using federal employees as pawns," exactly what I was saying. Now, a pawn is simply using a person for a political purpose, and that's what's happening with the shutdown, at least in my view. A political person, in this case, is a party, Democrats and Republicans. Now, President Kelly, I'm guessing, was probably referring to mainly Republicans using political employees as pawns. In my view, it doesn't really make a lot of difference. I think both parties are using political purpose or trying to use federal employees for their own political purposes. Federal employees, a lot of them, are now sitting at home, non-essential employees. They're not getting paid. If they may get paid later, but they may not. They don't know, so it's very stressful. Essential employees are working. They're not getting paid. Presumably, they will be paid. But the stress of not having the money coming in, not being certain you'll get paid later, is certainly stressful for them too. So the political pawns in this case, federal employees, didn't ask for the shutdown, don't want the shutdown. It's harmful to them, and it's harmful to a lot of Americans. So the parties are simply using them as pawns for their own purposes. Now, what's going on? There's actually some movement toward the middle, that is, between Democrats and Republicans, getting a little bit closer together, but still pretty far apart. And here's what's happening. Republicans initially did not want legislation that might weaken the political pressure that they would have against Democrats in the shutdown by agreeing to anything involving the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare before they had a continuing resolution. They just didn't want to do that, and that was their political posture. I'll explain why in a second. They didn't want to guarantee back pay or interim pay for furloughed workers. The rationale was fiscal restraint. They wanted to appeal to Republicans who want to cut spending in the government. They don't like the $38 trillion debt. Hopefully, nobody does because that's unsustainable. But it is a real problem, and they want to cut back on government spending. By agreeing to what the Democrats want, it would actually increase spending or certainly keep it very close to what it is now. So that's not the position that they wanted to seek through this shutdown that's now ongoing. By mid-October, they were modifying their position somewhat, and they introduced something called the Shutdown Fairness Act that would ensure pay for accepted workers. That is, those who are having to report to duty even during the funding lapse and even though they're not getting paid. So there was movement, uh, significant movement, not sufficient enough or not significant enough to sway the Democrats to agree with them, but there was some movement in that regard. Then finally, even though it's short of full relief, two senators were saying we might agree, they would consider agreeing and consider negotiating with others in their party to expand this act that was proposed to appeal to constituencies, particularly in states like Virginia, Maryland, and Texas with large numbers of federal employees, and that it would guarantee to all affected workers they would get the back pay if Democrats would delink health care subsidies from the continuing resolution. Now, that hasn't gone anywhere. Perhaps it will in the future, but as of the time of this recording, it's still sitting unresolved by either or both parties. And what about the Democrats? What they are seeking is an extension of subsidies for Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. These expired earlier. They want to have those subsidies reenacted, and they want to have this done before they agree to send employees back to work and to end the shutdown. So far, that's been their position. That's still their position. They have had some flexibility but nothing along the lines of what would encourage Republicans to go along with it. There's some people in the Democratic Party who are saying we might consider allowing the employees to go back to work, ending the shutdown with a firm guarantee that we're going to negotiate these subsidies. So far, that hasn't been very persuasive, even in the Democratic Party, so nothing that's gone forward is a possible solution. So, what's happening? Why is this going on? Well, first of all, Democrats, and Chuck Schumer is the Senate minority leader, so he's the leader of the Democrats, and he's facing a prospect of challenge from the progressives in his party, that is the left wing of the Democratic Party, especially from AOC, the a Democrat from New York, and she may be considering running against him in the Senate in the next election. So we'll see if that happens. He hasn't announced it, but there's a lot of discussion about it. There's a political undercurrent, and Schumer doesn't want to appear weak in dealing with the Republicans because that would weaken him in his own party. At the same time, John Thune, the Republican leader for the Showdown issue, is concerned about the disparate constituencies in the Republican Party. On the one hand, he's got some more moderate Republicans who are willing to go along with some of what the Democrats want, but they're mainly concerned with fiscal austerity. They want to cut government spending. They're concerned about the $38 trillion deficit that we currently have, the debt of $38 trillion, and they want to stop adding to that and start reducing it. On the other hand, you've also got what I'll call MAGA Republicans, Make America Great Again, coming from a Trump campaign slogan, where they don't want to go along with what the Democrats are seeking with regard to these healthcare subsidies. So the healthcare subsidies appear to be the major sticking point. Whether or not the parties will come to an agreement on that remains to be seen. So there has been some retreat from both parties, not much, but some. And I suppose the incremental steps that are being taken have the potential to eventually get around to seeing an agreement of some kind. Now, obviously, the potential for pressure increasing is obvious. Air traffic controllers control, obviously, flights. Several thousands of flights in a day have recently been delayed because there weren't enough air traffic controllers showing up for work. As we get closer to Thanksgiving, when you have hundreds of thousands or even millions of Americans flying somewhere, and flight delays are going to become a major problem. So you can see where that's going to happen. In addition, federal employees aren't being paid. The military, I don't think, is going to be paid, although an anonymous donor has donated in excess of $130 million to the Department of Defense, or now the Department of War, to pay these military personnel. So that may happen, but that would be enough for the next paycheck, but it's not going to go along. So the pressure is increasing every day that this shutdown continues. What are the prospects for resolution? The most obvious prospect, and probably the best one, would be short-term funding, a 30 to 45-day continuing resolution to reopen the agencies at current spending levels. So far, that's what the Republicans want. The Democrats aren't willing to go along with it, so there's a loggerheads on that. The second possibility is adding in worker protections, either enactment or incorporation of the Shutdown Fairness Act that has been proposed by Republicans to ensure all employees receive pay retroactively and prospectively during future funding lapses. Perhaps that'll be enough to get the parties to move a little bit so that they can agree to something that would end the shutdown. And finally, structured negotiations, a commitment to hold bipartisan hearings on ACA subsidies and to healthcare affordability, possibly linked to a separate health appropriations measure. I don't know that the Democrats will go along with that. Don't even know that the Republicans will go along with that. I think that's less likely. There is a possibility, however slight, that the Republicans and the Democrats are moving toward the center, that is, to some kind of an agreement in the very near future. My guess still is that it's likely that this thing could go on until Thanksgiving because the hardline positions both parties are taking is what's being presented to the public. There's not a whole lot coming out, even to being discussed, or no publications from insiders as to how this is going to be resolved yet. So it's still a ways away. In the meantime, we wish all of you luck. We know you're not getting paid, and that's not fun. You're also concerned about your security of financial security for your family. So we will be thinking about you. We hope this goes away quickly. If anything of significance happens, FedSmith will keep you advised, keep you informed, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you.